Hello, welcome to Battle in Barrow Gaming. My name's Kev and we're going to do another terrain crafting project. In this we're going to make a sort of Bretonnian medieval peasant village, such as this. That's what it's going to look like, a little sneak peek. Something like this appeared in an issue of White Dwarf. They made a Bretonnian hovel, but I thought that was too hovelly for me. It was just too dilapidated. It's not how I envisioned it. I guess for the 6th edition of Warhammer Fantasy it was sort of fitted, but I'm more focusing on the 5th for this project, I think. And in the 5th there's a passage in it that describes the cottage, where it says it's brick with thatched roofing. So whilst I wouldn't imagine it would have the best thatching, the one in White Dwarf was it was a hovel. So I want to make more of a cottage for a person. And speaking of people, what you don't see in my terrain making videos, and I thought I'd introduce him in this one, is I always use a model for scale. And it's a random model. It's this. This is Hugo. I thought we'd have a little meet of Hugo. Meet Hugo, a Bretonnian peasant from the region of Crenelles, just in stone's throw from the Lord's castle. He has a face that only his mother could love. He's the carpenter for the region and does a lot of the Lord's work, but he dreams of bigger things. One day, when a group travelling from the Empire passed by, he spoke to some of their peasants, and he heard outlandish tales like houses with glass in, and chimneys to take the smoke away, and he was jealous and decided that was the life for him, the life of an Empire peasant, so he wants to up sticks, move to the Empire and change his name to Hans. But at the moment he doesn't even have a house, so we better get building him one. And so yeah, I use him in my terrain making videos, and I thought from now on we're going to see a bit more of him, because he is a big part of the channel that no one sees. And if you're interested, he's from Foundry, Wargames Foundry, that's the company called it, the medieval peasants. So I've got a load of those I use for civilians in games. Yeah. But now, we might as well build Hugo's house. For this project you're going to need some 10mm foam that I'm going to just cut up into 10mm strips. So I'm going to use the hot wire cutter for this, and this little guide here to make it easier, and I'm just going to cut these up into 10mm strips. This project's great for all those leftover bits of foam that are just too good to throw away, but not really good enough for anything else. Once I've cut them up into 10mm strips, I'm going to cut them up into about 20mm lengths, like this, and these are going to be our bricks we're going to use. Okay, so we've got all these bricks, but they're looking a bit too neat and tidy, and there's a trick for that. Got this tin, just chuck them in. Chuck in a load of rocks. These are actually rocks I actually use for my gaming table. They're just rocks in the garden I painted up. Give them a good shake, and we are going to have to shake vigorously. Let's see how they're going. You can see they're getting dented up, but they're still not dented up enough, so I might put some more rocks in and give it another shake. And here they are, in all their sort of bricky glory. You can see all the got loads of detail on it. It's a nice simple way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of work out a rough size for the house. So I'm just going to put them on the desk and build them up like Lego. I'm just measuring just to see if I like the length, and I think yeah, this is good. And when I'm here I can work out the size of the base I'm going to put it on, because it will make it easier to build. I'm just working out it's going to be about 7.5, 4.5, 5. So I have a little scrap bit of chipboard. I'm just going to cut out the base to that size. When cutting chipboard, even though it's only 1mm thick, it's better to do it in multiple passes, like so. There we go, one base. And I'm just going to lay the bricks back out just to make sure I'm happy with how it's going to go. Which I think I am. And then on to the gluing. So a use of a set square on when we get to this stage just needs to do just to check, just to make sure we're not going too wonky. And if we are, now's the time to sort that out. Good foundations and all that. Just checking in with Hugo. Hello Hugo, and this is going to be your house. And using him. This is what I use him for, to work out scales of things like where windows are going to go. So here, if I put two layers in, I think that's going to be too high for the window. So the window is just going to go into the on top of the first layer, like so. And this is why I use a model for scale. So that's the one. That's what we're going to go with. So building up the second layer with a little window in. Not really measuring the size of the window, but it's going to be about 1 inch square. So I'm just going to put a block in here. Build up the second layer. One thing to note about the second layer is some of the bricks, you can see one at the end there, I've sort of slightly moved inwards. That's very deliberate, just so as, and I'm doing the same here, just to give it a bit of more. If you're going to use bricks, this is something why I wanted to do bricks rather than just score the pattern in. You can get a bit more indentation into the bricks. There might be times when here, that brick's just slightly too big to go along there. So you might have to trim them down. So I'm just using a knife here just to get where I need to cut it and glue it in. And keep the little offcuts as well, because they'll be useful if you need to make other cuts and you've got some that might be a similar shape. So I'll just put that there. The end bits here, I want it level here because we're going to make a door frame out of bricks towards the end. And that is the second layer done. Third layer is just going to be much the same. Just going to go along and add some bricks in. That's the third layer done. See, I've got a window, two windows at the side, one at the back and one more towards the front. Now we've got to move on to the fourth layer. I'm just going to sort of, again, you don't normally see this, I normally work this out offside, but if we're introducing Hugo, I'm just sort of now working out how many layers I'm going to do before I start doing sort of the roof and the door frame, how big the door frame is going to be. So I'm thinking it's going to be about this high. 4 layers of bricks, I think, maybe 5 layers of bricks. This is why it's good to have a scale model. I'm thinking 5 layers of bricks. So the next layer done, onto the other one. This actually does go together really quick. I think this is probably somewhat quicker than scoring a pattern into it and doing all the detail with scoring a pattern in. The downside is you have to leave this to dry because it is really flimsy. And now we're going to get onto the window where I need to get across the window. I guess I could have put something in there, but I'm just going to use the power of glue like so. I'll be adding glue in there, and of course it doesn't fit properly, so I'm going to have to use one of these little offcuts to glue in. Hopefully the glue will hold it in place. Which it does. But that's very delicate. Doing the same with the back window. This one's a bit better. So I don't have to do a middle block into it. So with this, I'm going to make the door frame go across at this level. So I just need to trim this brick so it's the same, the height of it goes up to the top of the house, and I think I might need to trim a little bit more off there. I shall do the same for the other side. Now we just got to do the top of the door frame, and that's just going to be bricks just going across, so in a similar way to how I've done the windows. What I'm going to do, I've actually glued this in too far back, so in a minute I'm going to realise and push it forward just because I want it to be a frame. There we go. This might be easy if you just glue it in straight in the correct position from the get-go, but ho-hum. Okay, now we've got to do the sort of roof bit of the wall. So with this we need to cut some blocks into sort of 45-degree angles, which I'm trying to show here quite badly. But that's how I do it. Just take a brick and just cut it at a 45-degree angle. Gonna need a load of those. And once you've got one, as you can see here, you can use that just to mark out the other block and cut that out. So that's handy. And some you're gonna need small blocks and long blocks, so I'm just preparing those. And then when you've got those in place, you can put the roof in. I should really have let this dry probably a bit longer, but I'm just working out how the roof is going to go. You can see I've done 5 layers of blocks before I start doing the roof. Got the next layer on. Once I've got it all on, just going to glue it in place. I've got a little top cap here, which is just a triangle again at 45-degree angles. So it's a right angle triangle, I guess. And just got to do the same for the back part, and this is how it will look now. Best off to leave this to dry so you don't collapse it, nothing happens. And don't do what I do where you keep playing around with it at this stage, because that will happen. Now I'm just going to make the windows, and I'm going to they're going to be shuttered windows, wooden shuttered windows, because as we've established, there's none of that posh glass or poor Hugo here. They're just wooden shutters with nothing else in. Oh, Hugo just dreams of glass. So I've just cut a square. So I put it in the chipboard from behind, drew around, marked it out, and sort of cut it out. And now I'm just going to trim it into shape so it just falls into the window gap. Once it's the correct size, I'm just going to score a window pattern in, so it's going to have a shutter on either side. So I've just marked that out. I'm just going to use a tool here. This is a sculpting tool, just to do a real deep score here for that would be like the 2 shutters. And then I'll just score a plank pattern in. So there's one sort of divided into 2, so you have 4 planks. And I'll score a wood texture in with the sculpting tool. Once that's done, I'm going to come in with my knife and just rough up the bottom, because this is a peasant cottage. This isn't the best quality shutters. Again, if only he had glass in his windows. Now I'm just going to do some beams that will go across the shutters, just to act as the things that will keep them shut in the windy times. So again, these are just strips of chipboard, same width as the window, scoring in a pattern, and then I shall glue these horizontally across the window. And once that's done, I shall glue this in place. The door is made in much the same way, so I just measured, put a bit of chipboard behind, drew around it like we did with the window, and now I'm just scoring a plank pattern in, and then a wood texture. Just like the windows, I'm going to rough up the top and bottom to make it look like the wood's worn a bit. And then I've got some strips of chipboard that I've put a wood texture in that I'm going to put across as crossbeams. One thing to note here is I'm not going to do it particularly neat and tidy. I kind of want that angle where it's not the best craftsmanship, even though Hugo is a carpenter and should have done it better. And then if they're too long, I'm just going to give them a trim. It's going to need a door handle, so if you watch the doors and windows video, this is made in much the same way. These are jewellery sort of jump rings. I think they're 4mm. The product link will be in the description for these, and I'll just glue them on to a bit of rectangle of chipboard, and this will get glued to the door. Before I do that, of course, one thing I do is put a little hole in for a keyhole. You probably won't see it in the game, but I know it's there. Just one final bit of detail to the door is I'm going to put nail holes in. So where there's a plank, I'm going to put a little hole so it looks like there is a nail going into the plank holding this all together. Next up, we want to do the roof, so I'm just going to make this out of a bit of cardstock, so I'm just going to tidy it up. Then for the roof, it's going to be the length of the house plus a little bit extra. I basically measured 1/2 of the roof, which is 8 centimeters, and doubled that, which is 16. Cut that out, scored down the middle, and fold it over like this. It's a little bit too big, so I can give that a trim. It looks like it needs 1 centimeter off each side. Once the roof has been glued on, I can I don't like square bases for terrain projects, it's too unnatural, so I'm just going to give it a more, I don't really like bases on terrain, but I felt this needed it, and so I'm just going to give it a more natural sort of non-straight shape. And what we're going to do now is we are going to undercoat it in a mixture of PVA, black paint and water. I just do rough measurements. I never measure this, and I always mix up more than what I need, so I'm always making terrain projects. So I guess if you want to know, it's, I don't know, 45 PVA, 45 paint, 10 water. I don't know, that'll do. That's a measurement. And so I'm just going to paint this all over the house on the walls. Don't necessarily have to worry about the roof because we're going to cover that in a bit, but one thing to note is you want to get into all those nooks and into the in the wall, because this pink foam, when you paint it, will show up like no one's business. This is probably a downside of doing the walls this way rather than just score them in. There's a lot of gaps to paint. Whilst you don't have to paint the roof, I did anyway, just because I know it's painted, and that's it. Next up, we are going to paint the walls. They're going to be painted a dark grey. This is called Storm Cloud, and then a light grey. First, I want an even darker grey, so I'm just using this Games Workshop paint. This is called Adaptus Battle Grey. So to begin with, I'm just going to paint that on, and it's going to be like an overbrush rather than a dry brush. So if you like a heavy dry brush or an overbrush, I actually like using model paints for terrain, because terrain is my favourite aspect of the hobby. So if I'm going to, that's my main interest, why aren't I going to use the best paints on that to get the best finish that I can? So a lot of people get upset when you use things like Games Workshop paints on terrain, but it's my favourite aspect, so I don't mind using it, and I want to get the best colours I can. Sure, there are times when I will use hobby paints. If I'm doing a large area, like here, the colour, I've got a suitable colour, so I'll use that for the next dry brush. But if I don't, I'm not averse to using hobby paints. This is a tester paint pot. It's the perfect colour that I like for the next layer. It's called Storm Cloud, and it's a bit like a Dawnstone, so it's like a cheaper way of getting Dawnstone. So I'm going to do a heavy dry brush of this, so just over the blocks. Next, I'm going to come in with a brown. This is like a Achaidh colour of brown. Again, because I got a nice suitable pot, I'll use this rather than a hobby paint. And the reason I'm doing this is because once I'm done, I don't mind, when I dry brush, I don't mind getting a bit of the dry brush into the wood to age it, so getting all that done before the final dry brush stage. So I'll do the windows with this and the door. And whilst I got this out, I had this idea to do a sort of weather the walls with it, so I'm going to make a wash. What you can't see I'm doing, I'm getting a bit on my brush and I'm just watering it down off camera. So I'm going to do it all around the bottom, sort of where rain will run down the walls from the roof and sort of down from the window. Just giving it a nice weathering look, and I was really pleased with this. Now what I'm going to do here is a dry brush of this paint, and this is called Coastline. So it's like a sarpy bone type thing, and I'm just going to add a bit too much on my brush there, but I'm just going to pick out across the beams. I'm going to go vertically, and across the actual window itself I'm going to go horizontally, just to really weather and pick out that wood effect. I'm going to do the same with the door, and this is going to be the final dry brush I'm going to do on the wall. This is called Urban Grey, and it's a really light grey colour, almost a white. I don't know what the equivalent would be in hobby paints, but you can see here sort of the shade it is. Now I'm going to do this across all the brickworks, and I don't mind if any of this gets onto the woodwork either. I'm paying particular attention to the edges of the door frame and the house itself. I'm going across all the bricks as well with it, just to pick out the most raised detail. Next up, I'm going to continue my weathering. This is a green called Camo Green. It's an old Games Workshop green. It's a bit dry, so I kind of want to water it up and use it almost as a wash. And I'm going to do the same as what I did with the brown, really, just dab it around. It's more like mould and mildew on the bricks, so I'm going to go around the edges of the bricks like so. Next up, I'm going to glue some sand onto the base. So I've got some PEBEO glue, and I've got just a pipette that I can drop some water in, so I can just mix up a almost 50-50 glue to water. And I'm going to paint that around the base and then sand the base. I'm going to do a section at a time to make it easier. I'm going to make sure I don't get any glue on that door. Around the bottom of the wall I'm not too worried about, it will just be mud built up. The sand I'm using, I've done a video on this. This was really cheap stuff. This only cost £1. So there is a video on the channel about that. I'm just going to do it over the tub so I can tap it back in. Any bits I've missed, which there was a bit of miss. You can tell how old that brush is. That's why I use this brush as a paintbrush, as a glue brush I should say. There we go. Now I'll just do the rest. Once I'm done, I'm just sort of scraping off the paint that may have got to underneath before it dries. Otherwise it'll be like sandpaper on your board. Don't want that. I've undercoated the sand when it's dry in brown, and now I'm just going to add some flock on. So this is a watered down PVA mixture again that I'm just putting on in splotches, but making sure I get the edge covered. And then I'm going to come in with some Woodland Scenics green blend flock. And like how I done the sand, I'm going to do it in stages, just to make it easier. Now the bit around the door, I'm not going to put that much around the walkway, just maybe a patch there, because that'll be really well worn ground, so I want to kind of represent that, so there won't be much grass in front of the doorway itself. Okay, now we've got to cover the roof. If you've seen the recent Shire video about doing the watermill, you know what I'm going to use. It's teddy bear fur. This is you'll get this everywhere, so make sure you hoover afterwards. If you want more detail about this, watch that video. But fur has a direction, and so what we want is to want to make sure that it goes down the roof. So you can't just cut one bit and cut it and fold it in half. You need to make sure it goes down, because here that would be wrong because it would be up. But so I'm going to use this at the moment just to roughly position it, coming with scissors, and cut the fur out. If you need any more help with this, watch the Shire watermill video that I did about doing cheap and quick thatching. And you will need 2 bits of this the same. You glue it on, and once it's glued on, you come in with a watery mix of PVA, and you're going to use an old toothbrush to brush it in rows starting at the bottom to give it a thatched roof effect. And what I'm doing here is just brushing it down at the bottom, just to bend it round to make sure it's not sticking up and it's falling down. It's hanging down. So once I've done this, I'll then leave this to dry. Now, unlike the Shire village where I wanted that thatching to be brand spanking new, Hugo can't afford brand new thatching, so this is going to be weathered thatching. So for this, I'm just going to paint some watered down brown paint, making sure I get good covering everywhere. Once that's done, you don't have to have it perfectly covered. Some bits shining through will be good. I'm going to come in with some Dryac bark and give it a pretty heavy overbrush. One thing you may note about this house is it doesn't have a chimney. My thinking of this is going to be like an old sort of Saxon hut where you have a fire in the middle of the house and the smoke just goes up into the eaves of the roof and escapes via the thatching. Which is why Hugo dreams of moving to the Empire, to get a nice posh chimney. Okay, and when we're done with this, I'm going to come in with some Steel Legion Drab just to do another dry brush. Make sure my brush is well loaded before you don't need to really wipe any of the paint off. And now this is a final dry brush of Rakarth Flesh, just to really bring out, sort of make it look weathered. This is where it begins to look like that weathered thatching. So yeah, this is it, almost done. I just want to add some fauna and maybe some mushrooms around the base so Hugo's got something to eat, some nice mushrooms. But oh no, they're red cap mushrooms, he can't eat those, they're poisonous. So let's make some of these. So I make these, whenever I do anything with green stuff, I always have some left over. And when I have some left over, I just make mushroom caps. So to do this, you just roll it into a ball and then just push it on your finger, end of your finger, just to give you a sort of semicircle ball. The Bard's Craft actually has an ingenious way of doing this with a hot glue gun. So he does it in quite a few of his videos. So go and watch some of those if you want an alternative way. But once you've made it, I just stick it at the end of a barbecue skewer or a toothpick. It doesn't matter about the size because we'll be cutting it later on. And so yeah, I normally have a few of these already made up just because I have green stuff left over, and then we're just going to paint them. To paint them, first of all I'm going to use Mephiston Red just on the top part of the cap. Then I am going to use a Rathbone on the underneath of the cap and the stem. As you can see here, I've got a really long stem, but you don't need to paint it all, just part of it. And I'm going to do underneath the cap. Once that's done, I'm going to come in with some white and just a bit on a sort of small brush and just do blobs, just random dots of various sizes, both big and small, like so. And that is your mushrooms done. When I come to attach them to the base, I just come in with a pair of pliers just to trim the stem, and I'll just use Superglue to glue them into place. Also want some sort of grass tufts around the base. I've got two different types here, and even though they're self-adhesive, they're never very good, they always fall off, so I'm just going to glue these on with some super glue as well. And this is how it looks now, all done with the tufts round. This is it complete. Yeah, I'm really pleased with this one, but I think we should have it all set up on the board and we'll have a look at it. And that's it for another terrain crafting video. I hope you enjoyed this one. There'll be some more regular ones in the future. All the products I use are going to be linked in the description, and they're sort of Amazon affiliate links, so if you do want to make something like this, you can buy them from there. I get a kickback and it doesn't cost you anything. And I'm terrible at self-promoting things. There is a Patreon page that I don't know really what to do with. There is a Discord for Patreon members, and all the stuff I sort of make for other games, all the accessories and sort of Warhammer Quest tiles and things like that, they're going to be made available to any Patreon level. And then the biggest one, you get your name in the credits, things like that. You can tell I really don't like self-promotion. Also, let's get something that's free for everyone. There is a Facebook group that you can join and share whatever you want, all your sort of wargaming stuff that you've been up to. There's a Facebook page, but I just normally just post pictures. I have a Twitter, don't really use that. I'm terrible at social media. Anyway, I hope you do have a look at some of them. It's nice to have a bit of a community, and sort of it inspires you. The next terrain crafting project is actually a request from a subscriber, so we're going to be doing that next time. So till then guys, take care.